The soft blue light of Valani Prime's twin suns cast gentle shadows across the crystal spires of the capital city. Ambassador Zeth Ka stood at the edge of the High Council chamber, watching smoke rise from the distant mountains where the invaders had landed 3 days ago. His large, dark eyes reflected the fear that gripped his entire species. The Valani had never known war. For over 10,000 years, their civilization had grown through peace and understanding. They shared resources, helped each other, and solved problems by talking. Their technology was advanced beyond most species in the galaxy, but they had never built weapons. They had never needed to. Now the Korthak Empire had come to their world with ships full of soldiers and guns. The reptilian warriors had declared Valani Prime their new territory. They wanted the Valani as slaves and their planet as a resource center. The gentle Valani had no way to fight back. Zeth Ka's hands shook as he activated the emergency communication system. The chamber filled with the blue glow of the galactic transmission array. He had to send a message across the stars, hoping someone would hear their cry for help. "This is Ambassador Zeth Ka of the Valani High Council," he spoke into the transmitter. His voice was calm, but his heart pounded with terror. "We are a peaceful people in desperate need of aid. The Korthak Empire has invaded our homeworld. We cannot fight them. We have no weapons, no soldiers, no way to defend ourselves." He paused, looking at the readings that showed Korthak ships spreading across their system like a disease. "We request humanitarian assistance from any civilization willing to help. We need medical supplies, evacuation ships, and refugee transport. We do not ask for military intervention. We only ask for help saving our people." The message went out into space, traveling faster than light toward distant stars. Zeth Ka hoped it would reach someone who cared about peace, someone who would help without asking for anything in return. Far away, in the Terran Colonial Defense Network headquarters, Captain Jake Morrison was finishing his third cup of coffee when the distress signal arrived. The 40-year-old captain had seen many battles in his 20 years of service. His weathered face showed the marks of countless missions in the dangerous outer colonies. "Sir, we're receiving a priority distress call," reported communications officer Lucy Adams. She was young, only 25, but she had worked communications for the fleet for 3 years. "It's coming from the Valani system about 40 light-years from here." Morrison straightened in his chair. "Put it through." The voice that filled the command center was soft and frightened. As Morrison listened to the plea for help, his jaw tightened. He had heard about the Korthak Empire. They were bullies who attacked weak civilizations and took what they wanted. "Get me Admiral Ben Cooper," Morrison ordered, "and wake up Commander Lisa Park. Tell her to bring the tactical files on the Korthak forces." Within minutes, the command center was full of activity. Admiral Cooper appeared on the main screen from his flagship, the TCS Liberty. He was a stern man in his 50s with gray hair and hard eyes that had seen too much war. "What's the situation, Captain?" Cooper asked. Morrison explained the Valani distress call. "They're asking for humanitarian aid, sir. No military support. Just evacuation and medical help." Cooper was quiet for a moment. "The Korthak Empire has been expanding for years. They've wiped out 6 civilizations in the past decade. Every time, other species just watched and did nothing. Commander Park arrived carrying data tablets full of intelligence reports. She was 38, smart, and known for her strategic mind. "Admiral, I've been tracking Korthak movements for months. They have a pattern. They attack peaceful worlds, enslave the population, and strip the planets bare. Then they move on to the next target." "How many ships do they have at Valani Prime?" Cooper asked. "Initial reports show about 30 vessels," Park replied. 3 heavy cruisers, 12 destroyers, and support ships, standard occupation force." Morrison leaned forward. "The Valani seem like good people, Admiral. They've never hurt anyone. They don't deserve this." Cooper nodded slowly. "No, they don't. And it's time someone taught the Korthak Empire that their days of easy conquest are over." He paused, his expression growing harder. "Captain Morrison, prepare the 3rd Fleet for immediate deployment." "Sir?" Morrison was surprised. The Valani only asked for humanitarian aid. They asked for help, Cooper said firmly. They're going to get it, but not the kind they expect. He turned to Park. Commander, how long to assemble a full battle group? Park checked her data. 18 hours, sir. We can have 40 ships ready to jump. Make it so, Cooper ordered. And send word to the other fleets. If this goes well, we might need backup. As the command staff dispersed to prepare for deployment, Morrison couldn't help but smile grimly. The Villani had asked for medical supplies and transport ships. Instead, they were going to get the full might of the human military machine. Humans had earned their reputation across the galaxy as Deathworlders. They came from a planet so dangerous that it had forged them into natural warriors. While other species evolved to run from danger, humans evolved to face it head-on. They didn't just fight to survive, they fought to win. The Korthak Empire had never faced humans in battle. They were about to learn why Earthborn soldiers were feared across the galaxy. They were about to discover that when humans offered help, they didn't just provide aid, they eliminated the threat completely. As the Third Fleet began preparations for departure, one thing was certain. The Villani had asked for salvation, and humanity was going to deliver it in the most decisive way possible. Ambassador Zeth Ka stood in the observation deck of the Villani High Council building, watching the sky with desperate hope. 3 days had passed since he sent the distress signal. The Korthak forces had taken control of half the planet, and their reptilian soldiers were rounding up Villani civilians for transport to slave camps. Any response to our message? Asked President Yalamin as she joined him at the window. The elderly Villani leader looked tired and afraid. Her people were dying while they waited for help that might never come. Nothing yet, Zeth Ka replied, softly. But we must keep hope. Someone out there will hear us. Someone will care enough to help. Suddenly, the air around them began to shimmer. The space above their planet started to bend and twist as reality itself seemed to tear open. Zeth Ka grabbed the windowsill as the building shook from massive gravitational forces. What is happening? Yalamin whispered. Then they saw it. Ships began emerging from hyperspace, but not the small medical transports or refugee vessels they had hoped for. These were warships. Massive, dark vessels with angular designs and weapon arrays that could level cities. The ships kept coming, one after another, until the sky was filled with a fleet unlike anything the Villani had ever seen. The lead ship was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the largest Korthak vessel. Its hull was painted in dark gray with bright red markings. Along its side, in bold letters, was written, TCS Ironhawk. Behind it came destroyers, cruisers, and carriers, each one bristling with weapons and armor. Those are not medical ships, Yalamin said in shock. Zeth Ka's large eyes went wide as he counted the vessels. 47 ships. This is not humanitarian aid. This is a war fleet. On the bridge of the TCS Ironhawk, Captain Jake Morrison watched his tactical display as the Third Fleet took position around Villani Prime. The Korthak ships in orbit were already scrambling to form a defensive line, clearly caught off guard by the arrival of so many human vessels. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface, reported Communications Officer Lucy Adams. Put it through, Morrison ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was shaky and confused. Unknown vessels. This is Ambassador Zeth Ka of the Villani High Council. We requested humanitarian assistance. Are you here to provide medical aid and evacuation support? Morrison looked at his crew and saw several of them trying not to smile. Ambassador Zeth Ka, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the Terran Colonial Defense Network. We received your distress call and are here to help. But you are a military fleet, Zeth Ka replied. We asked for peaceful assistance, not warfare. Ambassador, we don't do things halfway, Morrison said firmly. You asked for help. You're going to get it. Prepare a landing zone for our shuttles. We're coming down to talk. An hour later, Morrison stepped off his shuttle onto the crystal platform of the Villani capital. With him came Colonel Sam Blake, his ground forces commander, and Dr. Amy Stewart, the fleet's chief medical officer. The Villani who met them took several steps backward when they saw the humans. Morrison understood their reaction. Humans looked different from most galactic species. Their eyes faced forward like predators. Their teeth were sharp. Their muscles were built for fighting and surviving on a world that tried to kill everything that lived on it. Ambassador Zethka approached carefully, his hands raised in a peaceful gesture. He was tall and thin, with soft gray fur and large, gentle eyes that reminded Morrison of Earth deer. Everything about the Villani spoke of peace and innocence. "Captain Morrison," Zethka said nervously, "we are grateful for your response, but we must ask why you brought warships instead of medical vessels." "Because medical vessels can't solve your problem," Morrison replied. "The Korthak will just keep coming back. They'll take your people as slaves and strip your world bare. We're here to make sure that doesn't happen." President Yalamin joined, them looking even more frightened up close. "Captain, we are a peaceful people. We do not believe in violence. We cannot ask you to fight for us." Colonel Blake stepped forward. He was a large man with scars from many battles. "Ma'am, with respect, you don't have to ask. The Korthak Empire has been bullying peaceful worlds for years. It's time someone stood up to them." Dr. Stewart opened her medical scanner and began checking the Villani for injuries. "How many of your people have been taken by the Korthak?" she asked. "Nearly 10,000, Zethka replied sadly. "They are being held in camps near the landing zones." Morrison nodded grimly. "We'll get them back, all of them." Defense Coordinator Jektal arrived carrying data tablets with information about Korthak positions. He was younger than the others, with bright blue markings on his fur that showed his military rank. Even among the peaceful Villani, someone had to coordinate their defenses. "Captain Morrison," Jektal said, "I have been tracking Korthak movements. They have 31 ships in orbit and approximately 5,000 ground troops spread across our major cities." Colonel Blake studied the data. "Standard occupation pattern. They're not expecting real resistance." "Because most species don't resist," Morrison said. "Most species try to negotiate or run away. Humans do things differently." As they talked, more human shuttles were landing around the capital. Soldiers in heavy armor were setting up defensive positions and weapon emplacements. Medical teams were establishing field hospitals. Engineers were studying Villani technology and infrastructure. President Yalamin watched the activity with growing amazement. "You are preparing for war." "We're preparing to end a war," Morrison corrected. "The Korthak started this fight when they invaded your world. We're going to finish it." Admiral Cooper's voice came through Morrison's communication device. "Captain, the Korthak fleet commander is requesting to speak with us." Morrison smiled without humor. "Put him through, Admiral." The voice that filled the air was harsh and filled with arrogance. "Human vessels, this is General Vrex Khan of the Korthak 7th Battle Group. You are interfering in Korthak Imperial business. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Morrison looked at the Villani leaders, who were trembling with fear. Then he looked at his own people, who were calmly preparing for battle. "General Vrex Khan," Morrison replied, "this is Captain Jake Morrison. You have 24 hours to evacuate this system and release all Villani prisoners. This is your only warning." The Korthak general laughed. "You dare threaten the Korthak Empire? We have conquered dozens of worlds. What makes you think your small fleet can challenge us?" Morrison's expression grew cold. "You're about to find out why humans are called Deathworlders, General. 24 hours. The transmission ended, leaving silence in the Villani capital. The gentle aliens looked at the humans with a mixture of hope and terror, finally beginning to understand that they had not called for rescue. They had called forth something far more dangerous than they ever imagined. General Vrex Khan stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Korthak vessel Bloodfang, staring at the human fleet through the view screen. His red eyes burned with anger and confusion. In all his years of conquest, no species had ever dared to give him an ultimatum. The Korthak general was a massive reptilian creature, over 8 feet tall with scales like armor and claws that could tear through metal. He had conquered 12 worlds for the Empire and enslaved millions of beings. The idea that these unknown humans thought they could challenge him was insulting. "What do we know about these creatures?" he asked his intelligence officer. Commander Zex Moore consulted his datapad. Very little, General. They call themselves humans and claim to come from a world called Earth. There are rumors that they are Deathworlders, but we have no confirmed reports of their military capabilities. Vrexcon laughed, a harsh sound like grinding stone. Deathworlders? Every species thinks their home planet is dangerous. These humans probably evolved from some weak prey animal that learned to use tools. He turned to his weapons officer. How many ships do they have? 47 vessels, General. But they are smaller than our standard battlecruisers. Then we outnumber them in firepower, Vrexcon said with confidence. When their deadline expires, we will destroy them quickly and continue with our conquest of this world. On the surface of Valani Prime, Captain Morrison was meeting with his senior officers in a temporary command center they had set up in the Valani capital. The crystal walls of the building had been reinforced with human armor plating, and soldiers were stationed at every entrance. Colonel Blake spread out tactical maps on the table. Sir, we've identified all Korthak ground positions. They have 5 major camps holding Valani prisoners, plus garrison forces in 12 cities. Lieutenant Commander Roy Fisher, the fleet's reconnaissance specialist, added his report. I've been analyzing their ship movements and communication patterns. The Korthak are operating with standard Imperial doctrine. They expect submission or token resistance at best. Dr. Janet Cole, the fleet's xenobiologist, looked up from her research tablet. Captain, I've been studying Korthak military history. They've never faced a species that fought back effectively. Every world they've conquered either surrendered immediately or put up weak resistance before being crushed. Morrison nodded grimly. That's about to change. What about their ground forces? They're spread thin, Colonel Blake reported. They're using intimidation tactics rather than secure occupation. They have about 50 soldiers per city, which is enough to control a peaceful population but not enough to fight a real war. Admiral Cooper's voice came through the communication system from orbit. Captain, we're picking up increased Korthak fleet activity. They're moving into attack formation. Let them come, Admiral, Morrison replied. Are our people ready? All ships report battle ready, Captain. The crews are eager to show these bullies what happens when they pick on innocent people. Meanwhile, in the Valani High Council chambers, Ambassador Zethka was trying to understand what was happening to his world. President Yalamin sat beside him, watching human soldiers patrol their streets through the crystal windows. I do not understand these humans, Yalamin said quietly. They speak of helping us, but they prepare for massive violence. Defense Coordinator Jektal had been working with the human officers and was beginning to see their perspective. President, I have been studying their tactical reports. The Korthak Empire has destroyed 6 entire civilizations. Billions of beings are dead or enslaved because no one was strong enough to stop them. But we asked for peaceful aid, Zethka protested. Medical supplies and evacuation ships. Not this warfare. Jektal looked at his leaders with new understanding in his eyes. What if peaceful aid is not enough? What if the only way to truly help us is to make sure the Korthak can never threaten anyone again? Before anyone could answer, alarms began ringing throughout the city. Human soldiers were running to their positions, and the sound of engines filled the air as fighter ships launched from the human carriers. Captain Morrison's voice came through the city's communication system. All Valani civilians take shelter immediately. The Korthak fleet is beginning their attack. Human forces are moving to intercept. In space above the planet, the battle was about to begin. General Vrexcon had decided not to wait for his deadline to expire. Seeing the human preparations, he chose to strike first while he thought he had the advantage. All ships, attack formation, he ordered. Destroy the human fleet quickly, then resume ground operations. The Korthak ships moved forward, in their traditional battle line, a formation that had worked against every other species they had encountered. Their heavy cruisers led the charge, with destroyers providing support and smaller vessels protecting the flanks. Admiral Cooper watched the Korthak approach on his tactical display. Well, gentlemen, they've made their choice. All ships prepare to show them how Deathworlders fight. The human fleet did not form the neat battle lines that galactic warfare traditionally demanded. Instead, they scattered into smaller groups, using asteroids and space debris as cover. Their ships moved in 3 dimensions, attacking from above, below, and from the sides simultaneously. Captain Beth Williams, commanding the carrier TCS Stormbird, launched her fighter squadrons with a single order: hunt them down. The human. Fighters did not engage in the formal dogfighting that most species practiced. Instead, they used pack tactics, coordinating their attacks like wolves hunting prey. They struck at Korthak weak points, disabled engines and weapons, then moved on to the next target. Major Chris Evans led a squadron of bombers that used the planet's moon as cover, appearing behind the Korthak fleet when they were least expected. His ships carried weapons designed not just to destroy, but to spread fear and confusion among enemy ranks. On his flagship, General Vrex Khan watched in growing horror as his ordered battle formation fell apart. The humans fought like nothing he had ever encountered. They used tactics that seemed impossible, moving in ways that defied military logic. "They are everywhere at once," his tactical officer reported in panic. "Our sensors cannot track their movements. They appear and disappear like ghosts." "Impossible," Vrex Khan snarled. "No species fights like this. Where is their honor? Where is their formation discipline?" Commander Zexmore looked up from his console with fear in his reptilian eyes. "General, they are not fighting like a military force. They are hunting us." For the first time in his career of conquest, General Vrex Khan felt something he had never experienced before. As human ships swarmed around his fleet like predators circling wounded prey, the great Korthak general finally understood what it meant to face a species that had evolved not just to fight, but to kill. The age of easy conquest was ending, and the Korthak Empire was about to learn why no one in the galaxy wanted to make enemies of the creatures from the death world called Earth. The space battle raged above Valani Prime as the human fleet tore through Korthak formations like hunters, pursuing wounded prey. General Vrex Khan watched his tactical display in growing terror as ship after ship went dark on his screens. "Report," he roared at his communications officer. "We have lost 8 destroyers and 2 cruisers, General," came the panicked reply. "The humans are using weapons we do not understand. They turn our own ships against us." Indeed, the humans were fighting unlike any species the Korthak had ever encountered. Commander Dan Foster led electronic warfare specialists who hacked into Korthak computer systems, turning their automated defenses against their own vessels. Korthak ships found themselves firing on their allies as human viruses spread through their networks. Captain Beth Williams coordinated fighter attacks that came from impossible angles. Her pilots used the planet's gravity well to slingshot around the world, attacking Korthak rear positions with devastating surprise strikes. They did not engage in honorable single combat like civilized species. Instead, they hunted in packs, overwhelming individual targets with coordinated assaults. "This is not warfare," Vrex Khan's tactical officer screamed. "This is butchery." The Korthak general tried to rally his forces. All ships fall back to defensive positions, form a protective sphere around the command vessel. But the human ships did not allow orderly retreat. They pursued fleeing Korthak vessels like wolves chasing scattered sheep. Major Chris Evans led bomber squadrons that targeted engines first, crippling ships before destroying them. The Korthak could not run, could not hide, and could not fight effectively against an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized combat. On the surface of Valani Prime, the ground battle was even more shocking to Korthak sensibilities. Colonel Blake led human marines in attacks that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The soldiers did not march in formation or announce their presence with battle cries. They moved like shadows through Valani cities, striking at Korthak positions and disappearing before the enemy could respond. Sergeant Tony Green led a squad that had been tasked with rescuing Valani prisoners from a Korthak camp outside the capital city. His team approached through underground tunnels using Valani construction workers as guides. They emerged inside the camp perimeter like ghosts materializing from the earth. The Korthak guards had never seen humans before. The sight of the armored figures with their forward-facing predator eyes and efficient, deadly movements filled the reptilian soldiers with primal fear. These were not the soft herbivores they were used to conquering. These were apex predators from a world that had forged them into perfect killers. Free the prisoners, Green ordered his team. Eliminate any Korthak who resist. The battle for the camp was over in minutes. The Korthak soldiers, trained to intimidate peaceful civilians, found themselves facing enemies who moved with lethal precision. Human soldiers did not hesitate, did not show mercy to slavers, and did not give second chances to those who had tortured innocent beings. Similar scenes played out across the planet as human forces methodically dismantled every Korthak position. Captain Morrison coordinated the ground operations from his command center, working with Volani Defense Coordinator Jektal to identify every location where prisoners were being held. The humans fight like nothing we have ever seen, Jektal reported to President Yalamin through their communication system. They do not just attack, they hunt. Every move is calculated to cause maximum damage while protecting innocent lives. Amy Stewart had set up field hospitals to treat rescued Volani prisoners, but her medical teams were also gathering intelligence on Korthak biology and weaknesses. She studied captured Korthak equipment and interrogated prisoners to understand their military structure. Captain Morrison, she reported, I've learned something important. The Korthak Empire operates on fear and intimidation. They have never faced an enemy that was more frightening than they are. Their soldiers are trained to terrorize civilians, not fight real warriors. Morrison nodded grimly. That explains why they're falling apart so quickly. They're used to being the predators. Now they're the prey. In space, the Korthak fleet was being systematically destroyed. Admiral Cooper had divided his forces into hunting packs that cornered individual enemy ships and overwhelmed them with concentrated firepower. The humans used every asteroid, every piece of space debris, every gravitational anomaly as a weapon against their enemies. General Vrex Khan found himself trapped on his flagship as human vessels surrounded him. His mighty fleet, which had conquered 12 worlds, was being torn apart by an enemy that fought without honor, without mercy, and without the civilized restraint that had allowed the Korthak to dominate the galaxy. General, his communications officer reported with terror in his voice, we are receiving surrender requests from 7 of our remaining ships. Surrender? Vrexcon could not believe what he was hearing. Korthak warriors do not surrender. They do now, sir, came the reply. The humans have crippled half our fleet. Our soldiers on the planet are reporting impossible casualties. They say the humans appear from nowhere, strike without warning, and disappear like demons. For the first time in his military career, General Vrexcon faced the possibility of defeat. Not just defeat, but total annihilation at the hands of a species he had never heard of until 3 days ago. Commander Zexmore looked up from his tactical display with pure fear in his reptilian eyes. General, the humans are not just fighting us, they are demonstrating something. Every move they make is designed to show us that resistance is hopeless. What do you mean? Vrexcon demanded. They could have destroyed us immediately, Zexmore explained. But they are taking their time, picking us apart piece by piece. They want us to understand that they are superior in every way. They want us to carry this message back to the Empire. On the planet's surface, Ambassador Zethka and President Yalamin watched human soldiers escort thousands of freed Volani prisoners to safety. The rescued civilians told stories of human warriors who moved like deadly spirits, appearing suddenly to strike down their captors and vanishing just as quickly. They asked for our help, Yalamin said quietly, and we were afraid they would bring violence to our peaceful world. They did bring violence, Zethka replied, watching human medics treat injured Volani with gentle care, but they brought it to our enemies, not to us. The battle was nearly over. The Korthak forces that had seemed so powerful just hours before were scattered and broken. The mighty empire that had conquered dozens of worlds had met something they could not understand, could not defeat, and could not escape. The humans had not just won a battle, they had delivered a message that would echo across the galaxy. The age of unopposed conquest was over. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they did not fight wars, they ended them. The last Korthak ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light above Volani Prime. General Vrexcon's flagship, the Bloodfang, had been the final vessel to fall. The mighty Korthak fleet that had terrorized peaceful worlds for decades was now nothing but debris floating in space. On the bridge of the TCS Ironhawk, Captain Morrison watched the tactical display as the last red dots disappeared from his screen. "All enemy vessels destroyed or surrendered, Admiral Cooper," he reported through the communication system. "Excellent work, Captain," came the reply from Admiral Cooper's flagship. "What about ground forces?" Colonel Blake's voice joined the conversation from the planet's surface. "All Korthak positions have been neutralized, sir. We have freed every Volani prisoner and secured all major cities. Total enemy casualties are approximately 4,800. We lost 3 soldiers." Morrison shook his head in amazement. The entire Korthak occupation force had been wiped out with minimal human losses. It was a level of military efficiency that would have been impossible against an enemy that understood how to fight Deathworlders. "Sir," Communications Officer Lucy Adams reported, "we're receiving transmissions from multiple Korthak-controlled systems. Word of our victory is spreading fast." Morrison smiled grimly. "I'm sure it is. Put me through to the planet's surface." Down, in the Volani capital, Ambassador Zeth Ka stood in the ruins of what had been a Korthak command post just hours before. Human soldiers were helping Volani civilians return to their homes while medical teams treated the wounded. The efficiency and care with which the humans worked was almost as shocking as their military prowess. President Yalamin approached him, still looking dazed by everything that had happened. "Zeth Ka, our people are free. All of them. The humans. Found every prison camp, every holding facility. Not a single Volani remains in Korthak hands." "I know," Zeth Ka replied quietly. "But at what cost? We asked for peaceful aid, and instead we brought the most violent species in the galaxy to our world." Before Yalamin could respond, Captain Morrison's voice came through the city's communication system. "Ambassador Zeth Ka, President Yalamin, please report to the landing platform. We need to discuss what happens next." 20 minutes later, the Volani leaders stood before Captain Morrison and his senior officers. The human captain looked tired but satisfied. Behind him, Colonel Blake was coordinating the transfer of captured Korthak equipment while Dr. Amy Stewart prepared her final medical reports. "Captain Morrison," Zeth Ka began carefully, "we cannot express our gratitude for what you have done. Our people are free because of your actions. But we must ask, what do you want from us in return?" Morrison looked surprised. "Want from you? Nothing. You asked for help, and we provided it. But surely," President Yalamin said, "such a massive military operation must have some purpose beyond simple charity. Do you wish to establish a base here? Control our resources? Take some of our people as payment?" The human officers exchanged glances, and several of them looked genuinely puzzled. Colonel Blake stepped forward. "Ma'am, with respect, we're not the Korthak Empire. We don't conquer people we've helped." Dr. Janet Cole, who had been studying galactic politics during their mission, provided context. "President Yalamin, I understand your confusion. Most galactic civilizations view military assistance as the beginning of occupation or control. Humans see it differently." "How do you see it?" Zeth Ka asked. Captain Morrison answered simply. "We see it as the right thing to do. The Korthak Empire was enslaving innocent people. We stopped them. That's what civilized beings do when they see injustice." Defense Coordinator Jektal, who had worked closely with the human forces during the battle, spoke up. "Captain, your people have shown us something we never understood. True strength is not about conquering others. It is about protecting those who cannot protect themselves." "Exactly," Morrison nodded. "The Korthak thought strength meant taking what you want from weaker species. They were wrong. Real strength means using your power to defend those who need defending." Admiral Cooper's voice came through the communication system. "Captain, we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. 17 different species are sending messages of thanks. Apparently, word of our victory has reached every world the Korthak had enslaved." Dr. Susan Wright, the fleet's intelligence officer, added her analysis. "Sir, our actions here have had consequences far beyond this system. 3 Korthak client species have declared independence. 2 more are requesting human assistance. The Empire's authority is crumbling across multiple sectors. Morrison turned back to the Villani leaders. This is bigger than just your world now. The Korthak Empire built their power on fear and intimidation. When species saw that they could be defeated, everything changed. What will you do now? President Yalamin asked. We're going to make sure this never happens again, Morrison replied. Admiral Cooper is establishing the Terran Protection Protocols. Any species that request humanitarian assistance from humanity will receive it, but they'll also receive something they might not expect. Which is? Zethka asked. Complete elimination of whatever threatened them in the first place, Colonel Blake answered. We don't just provide aid, we provide solutions, permanent solutions. Over the following days, as human ships prepared to depart Villani Prime, the full scope of their impact became clear. The Korthak Empire, which had dominated this sector of the galaxy for over a century, was collapsing. Without their reputation for invincibility, their subject worlds were rising in rebellion. Other predatory species that had followed the Korthak model were reconsidering their aggressive expansion policies. Ambassador Zethka stood once again at the observation deck, but now he watched human ships preparing to leave rather than hoping for their arrival. President Yalamin joined him as she had 5 days earlier when their world seemed doomed. They are leaving, she observed. Yes, Zethka replied. They came when we needed them, solved our problem completely, and now they are going home. They want nothing from us except the knowledge that we are safe. Are we safe? Yalamin asked. Jektal appeared beside them, carrying reports from across the galaxy. More than safe, President. The entire Korthak Empire is in retreat. 6 of their occupied worlds have been liberated by rebel forces. 3 more Korthak fleets have surrendered without fighting rather than face human forces. And other aggressive species? Zethka asked. They are all reconsidering their expansion plans, Jektal reported with a smile. Word has spread across the galaxy that there is a species called humans who will intervene if peaceful civilizations are threatened. The age of easy conquest is over. Captain Morrison's final transmission to the planet came as his fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace. People of Villani Prime, you are under the protection of the Terran Colonial Defense Network. Any species that threatens you will answer to us. Live in peace knowing that there are those who will fight so you never have to. As the human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, leaving only empty space where a war fleet had been, the Villani finally understood what had happened. They had asked for aid and received something far more valuable. They had received protectors, who asked for nothing in return except the right to defend the innocent. Across the galaxy, the message was clear. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and they brought with them a simple philosophy: harm the innocent and face the consequences. The age of unopposed aggression was over. The Deathworlders were watching, and they would not tolerate injustice. The galaxy would never be the same.